Hello everybody, my name's Steve, I'm the British Railroader and welcome to my model railroad room for a little video about points or turnouts or switches, depending on what you call them, fairly much depending on where you are in the world. And today I'm not necessarily going to go through all the finer points of point work, but what I wanted to look at is some different methods that you can use to operate your points. And at the moment, I'm kind of using all three on Brooklyn Park. So probably the best thing to do is go down onto the workbench and just explain what I'm talking about. Okay, here we are down on the workbench, and what I thought I would do before we get into motorization, I just thought we would have a look at some points or turnouts or switches, again depending on where you are in the world and what terminology you're used to. I'm probably going to stick to points, okay, because that's kind of what I grew up with over here in the UK. So I've got two types here. I've got this one on the left, which is a Hornby set track point. You guys in America would probably think of it like snap track. This is the stuff that you get in train sets. It's, you know, it's usable, but it's very basic. Here I have got one of the streamline points from Pico. This happens to be a Code 83 American style point, but actually they all fairly much work the same way throughout their entire range. It's just how they look that's different. This is a slightly older one. This one's got what they call an electro frog point. I'm not worrying about that today. We're not wiring points or whatever. We are literally looking at how to operate them from a mechanical point of view. Now, one thing that all of your points will have in common is down here. Okay, and I'm just going to zoom in a little bit if I can. Here we go. So down here you have what some people call a tie bar. I've seen people call it a switch rod, a stretcher bar, a throw bar. I've always known it as a tie bar. So again, I'm just going to stick to the terminology that I know. And all points will have this. And as the tie bar moves, it sets the blades of the point to whichever direction you want to go to. So everybody, I think, is pretty aware of that. Now, most model points that you get, and you can probably you may not be able to hear it, but there's a little click as I move it, because there's a spring just in here that holds the point in whichever direction. So it means that you don't need anything extra to lock the blades in position. They're kind of like self-locking. Now, most model railway points that you buy are going to be like this, with this self-locking mechanism. Certainly Hornby's, Picos, Bachmann's over here in the UK. As far as I know, Walthers, Atlas, quite a lot of others are like that. Now, there are some very fine scale points which don't have that locking mechanism, so you have to use something else. I'm not going to worry about that today. I think what I want to do today is just focus on the average everyday kind of point. So the first way that you can move a point, most obviously, is manually. And basically there are two ways that you move points, either manually or electrically. Okay. Now, manually, there are several ways you could do it. You can, like with this one, use your finger, because these ones, because they're in train sets, they're kind of designed to be easy to move with your finger. These ones are less easy, especially when they're in position, and you don't really want to be putting your finger here and moving the blades. So get a tool. Now, this is a KD uncoupler, and it's perfect for this because this will fit in this hole in the middle. And they've all got a hole in the middle of the tie bar. And that's for later on when you want to motorize things, which we'll look at shortly. But you don't have to use one of these. You can use a toothpick. Again, just in that hole, left and right. And sometimes they've got holes on the edges, just like here. So you can do it like that. You can use any tool. I mean, I've got a little dental pick here. Wouldn't necessarily recommend using something metal, because if you accidentally bridge the rails, then you're going to cause problems. But you know, it works in the same way. Some people use bamboo skewers. Everybody will find their own tool, but that is the simplest way of doing it. Now, you can manually change points without having to put your hand over the tie bar. Lots of people have come up with creative ways of perhaps using linkages, etc., under the baseboard to be able to then remotely operate their points manually. And I've got here some piano wire, which you can bend, drill a hole underneath the baseboard, and hopefully, hang on a second, if I line it up, if you can see that there, the wire has gone through, and you can, ooh, he says, this is a bit fiddly. As you can see, it will open and close the point. If you have that under your baseboard, you have it properly kind of channeled, you can then have that coming through the fascia of your baseboard with some kind of knob on it, and it gives you a push-pull rod. However, I'm not going to explain that to you. I am going to link you to a video in the description from my friend Lee, whose layout is CSX Isola West. I've mentioned him before. He did a really good video where he uses piano wire, chocolate block connectors, and little wooden kind of dowel spheres to make a system that's actually quite cheap to do and quite simple. I did kind of have a go at it on Brooklyn Park, but I decided to go a different route, which I will explain in a moment. So when it comes to the manual moving of points, there are several ways of doing it. I'm just going to move the points out of the way, because what I want to look at next is what can you use to move your point blades that doesn't involve you pulling something, sticking your finger on something. So over here, we call them point motors. I think in America, you guys know them as switch machines. So they are, in the very basic form, something like this. So this is a solenoid motor. This one happens to be what we call a seep motor that's made in the UK. I believe they're still available via Gauge Master, though they may not be anymore, but I'm sure a lot of shops have got them in stock. These have been around for quite a while, and basically what you've got, so you've got a metal bar in the middle, and then you've got two electrical coils either side. And basically, if you send a current to one of the coils, the throw bar is going to be pulled into the coil because you're magnetizing the coil. And then again, you use a momentary switch, do the other one, and it moves the bar into the other side of the coil. These are quite old. The ones that you're probably going to see more often these days, and have been around for a long time, is this style. This one happens to be from Rails of Sheffield, but lots of other companies do these. Let's just take that out. The Pico ones, which have been around for a long, long time, are very, very similar to this. And in fact, this one is designed in a way that it's interchangeable with the Pico ones. Hornby do a version, Gauge Master do their own version. These have been around for ages. The modern ones now are coming pre-wired, which basically means that you don't have to solder onto the point motor or crimp onto various tabs like you always had to. And these work very, very simply. So I've wired this one up onto a board. So we have got a controller that has a 16-volt AC feed. So you've got your ordinary DC feed for your track. This has got 16-volt AC feed. Now you can wire that into the point motor circuit direct, but I've always found that you need a bit more oomph. So what I've got at the back here is a capacitor discharge unit. So basically what happens is the 16 volt feed goes in here, and out we've got one common wire which goes to this switch and another wire that goes to the motor. And basically with the switch, it's a momentary push switch, and you can basically see if this will work. Hang on, not yet. Let's have a go. So you push the switch once and the bar is thrown. Okay, push it the other way and it goes back the other way. So that will move with that little bar in the hole there. That will move that. And as I said, these particular ones are designed so you can either mount them to the baseboard, and you have a little slot with the actuator there, which, as you can see, isn't very long, but you can get extension bars. They have little sleeves that go over one end there and the other end, and that will come up through the actuating hole on the points. With Pico points, however, you can see, get me in camera, you can see here these little slits, and that's to line up with these tabs on the other side. So as you can see there, those tabs will go through, and you can actually mount the point motor directly to the point if you want to. I don't tend to do that because it means you need a whacking great hole in your baseboard, and that just causes other problems with things like ballasting, etc., etc. So I tend to go for, as I've done here, narrow slot, and then the extension going up. These are great, but to work these you need to have, as I said, that centering spring or that locking spring in place, because these will not lock your points into the position that they need to be in. They will only move it. You're using the point to lock it. Okay, let's move on to something else. Now, points in real life don't snap backwards and forwards. They move gently in more of a analog motion rather than a digital motion. And there are different types of point motors, switch machines, whatever you want to call them, that can achieve this, and they're called solenoids. So as you can see, this is quite a big beast. This is a DCC Concept Cobalt IP Digital. They do an analog version, so what I'm going to say initially applies to both. And basically what you've got here is a rod which will go up through your baseboard and will go through your actuating hole on your point. Okay, so what you've basically got is a servo motor, which will, however you're going to operate it, actuate, and we'll do this, hopefully. There we go. So as you can see, as that moves across there, this end goes the other way, and that will move the point. Now, these can be activated both by means of a switch. So I've got a switch rigged up here, which isn't quite working at the moment. Oh, look, there it is, look. Sod's law, as they say, it'll work when you want it to. Or you can control them digitally. Now, this one happens to have a DCC decoder built into it. So nothing to add. It's literally, forget the switch wires. They don't need to be there. But literally, you just need the two wires from your DCC power bus to go into this. And you can operate it using your DCC system. And that will work perfectly well. You can, with these, there's a pin next to or a little hole next to these two, where you can power the frog, and it will set the frog power to whichever way you've got it wired. So you just have to make sure it's wired up correctly. As as I said, they do analog versions of these. You will see other makes out there. Tortoise is the famous one that's been around for a very long time. The Tortoise switch machines, and there are other versions of those. I believe Pico does a servo motor system. I've never tried it, but I've kind of got into these Cobalt Digital. Now, I'm going to link in the description a video from, or a couple of videos from Larry Puckett, the DCC guy. He has done a lot of work using IP Digital switch machines. If you went to his videos number 391 and 188, that will he goes through using the IP Digital. But again, Larry's channel is great. He goes through lots of different motors. Now, with the servo motor, there's one thing you've got to remember with your points. A servo motor will actually, because of the way it works, lock your point into the position it needs to be in. And what it doesn't like is that little snapping spring that's in there. That needs to be removed. Now, with Pico points, as you can see here, I'm not going to remove this because I'm saving this for a different project. There are two metal tabs here, which if you bend them up, turn this over, there's a little metal plate that comes up and the spring will just pop out. And then you can put the plate back in and you are done. Now, not as easy when you've got them in position, which I found out when I installed my first one of these on Brooklyn Park. What I found is I've had to get in there and just cut the spring. It's fiddly, but it can be done. However, what I would recommend is decide on which kind of point operation you are going to use and lay your track accordingly. So these can also be operated digitally, but you will need a accessory decoder. So that you don't tend to find that these ones have decoders built in, but you can have them next to them. Now, again, I'm not promoting anybody in particular, but Rails of Sheffield, where I got this from, actually do have decoders, which I think are made for them by DCC Concepts. So, you know, talk about keeping it in the family, which you just kind of wire in through these wires and then put your DCC power bus in. And again, it's got facilities for things like frog powering, etc., etc. They are very, very good decoders. They have actually got a small built-in capacitor discharge unit. So they work every single time, so you don't have to worry about misthrown points. You could use those the accessory decoders are available separately. You could use them with other manufacturers' points, I'm pretty sure, because they all work on pretty much the same basis. What I would also say is that other decoders are available. I know Gauge Master makes some. I'm not sure if Pico make them, but they are available from various other sources. So yes, you can have these controlled digitally and actuated in exactly the same way from your decoder. And again, I believe there's the facility that you can actually keep a switch in the circuit, so that if you wanted to and you didn't want to use your handset, you could just switch them using the switch, and it would still have all of the same properties as if you were doing it with a DCC system. Okay, so that's just a little wander through some of the ways that you can operate your points on your layout. Is one way better than another? Not necessarily. If you've got a very small switching layout, then doing things manually is probably the way to go. And when I set up Brooklyn Park, I started with the intent of just manually switching my points as if I were the conductor. As I moved on, I probably got a little bit lazier. So I had a few of these and some of the accessory decoders. So I started a slow process of motorizing my points. So 3 of them are motorized with this. And then I started looking at the IP digital switch machines. Thanks to Larry Puckett, who brought them up again. Larry, you've got a lot to answer for, mate. And I found that I really like these. Now, they aren't actually particularly fiddly to fit, and they're quite easy to program. And so I'm probably going to motorize the rest of my points. Well, I've already done one, and I'm going to motorize the last two with these. So I will have a mixed system. I'll have half of my points with this style of point motor, half of them with this style of point motor. And I think looking to the future and for future layouts, this is almost a way for me to almost sort of beta test which ones I prefer. And it may be that in the future I go with this style, maybe not necessarily the Cobalts, maybe another manufacturer's, but at the moment I quite like the Cobalts. But then I also like these ones. But what I don't like is the snapping sound that I get when these operate, whereas these, you've got that whirring motor sound, but I quite like them. As for these old things, well, I'm afraid that from my point of view, they're probably a little bit obsolete now, this particular type. They've always had mixed reviews, the old seat point motors. I always found them quite reliable as long as I had a capacitor discharge unit. They had a mechanism for switching the polarity of your frog, which is always a good thing. But they could be finicky. These, if you don't get them centered properly and lined up properly so that they're square with the thing, they can cause problems, but they're a little bit more forgiving. These ones, I think they probably are even more forgiving. You've probably got a little bit more leeway because of the way that they work and because you haven't got the spring to worry about in the points. But anyway, my conclusion, at the moment, I'm erring towards these, but these are absolutely fine, and they're a lot cheaper. These are between 20 and 30 pounds each. One of these you can pick up. They're still relatively quite cheap if you're using them in sort of like analog mode, even with a decoder. I think they come up at about £10 cheaper than these, but it's entirely up to you. There is another option for point motors. There are surface mounted point motors that kind of sit next to the tie bar on the points. I have used them in the past. They're not my favorite. I don't actually have any, so I couldn't really talk you through them, but they're quite big and bulky, but they have their use. There are some areas where you can't fit a point motor underneath. And I know that Hornby have got kind of like a surface mounted point motor housing which looks like a hut, which kind of can help disguise these things. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you've enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't done so already, why don't you subscribe to the channel? It's totally free and it's great for me because it gets my stats up with YouTube. When you do subscribe, a little bell's going to come up. Click it, press all, and you will be notified of all my videos as they are released. If you have any comments or questions, either post them below or you can email me at this email address that's coming across the screen right here. I'm also available on all of these social media sites, so feel free to go on them, like, subscribe, all of that kind of thing, and you can message me through there as well. Now, momentarily, YouTube is going to come up with a video suggestion for you on the screen, either here or here. I can never remember which. If you've seen it before, go to the channel, find yourself another video and take a look. If you haven't seen it before, then please do watch it because I think you might enjoy it. But that's it from me. My name's Steve. I'm the British Railroader, and I'm saying goodbye from my model railroad room. Bye-bye.